What's up, everyone? Been having some problems with the Mojo boat with RPM loss, and at times it would only go to like 6,800 RPM, sometimes 7,000, 7,200 RPM, and other times it would work perfectly and then fall back on its face. Took me a while to figure this out, but when I finally figured it out, I had kind of one of those aha moments, and finally figured it out. If you have a SeaDoo RXPX or RXTX 300, or probably almost any jet ski or mini boat with that motor in it, you know, probably even work on the 230s and the 260s and so on, and you have an RPM loss problem, hopefully this video will help you out. It took me a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort to chase this thing down, but when I finally found it, it felt like I needed to let you guys know. I did go online and search all over for help with this problem, as well as YouTube, and couldn't find anybody that ran into this problem on YouTube. So enjoy the video, hope you get something out of it, and if you have this problem, you'll know how to fix it. Thanks. So the first thing I checked was to make sure all of the coils were working by simply unplugging one at a time and starting up the boat. You can tell whether it's running rough or whether it's running smooth. Every one of those tests worked perfectly. Remove one plug, that cylinder obviously wasn't firing, you could clearly hear it. Next one, next one. So I determined all three cylinders are firing correctly. The next was to see if there was a pinch in the fuel rail or the fuel supply line, starving it for fuel. And as you can see, there's nothing wrong with that. Electrical connection was good, and so on. At the time, the fizzle intercooler was in there, not the stock one. So I know this isn't a SeaDoo, but it's a SeaDoo engine. It's a Rotax 300 horse with a JP Racing Stage 2 kit, making almost 400 horsepower through his increased intercooler, which you notice is not there right now, and the supercharger. So what was the problem? Here's the problem. This carbon filter right here, right there, goes to fuel evap system or something like that. Basically comes out of the tank on the vent, goes through the carbon filter, out the boat, and filters all the air to make sure it's all clean and good for the environment. However, somehow that thing broke down, and some of that carbon got into the fuel system. So pretty simple. It plugged up the fuel filter, and you know, problem solved, right? Put a new fuel filter on, everything's gonna be fine. So first step, pull out the fuel pump, change the fuel filter, put the pump back in, problem should be solved. Right? Wrong. Went from 6,800 RPM to 7,200 RPM. Then I spoke to a couple professionals in the jet ski industry with these motors, and they said, oh, there's an inner filter inside of there, you need to change that too. So I took it out and replaced the inner filter. Now I'm getting 7,500 RPM out of it. Gained a couple hundred RPM. Still well below the 9,200 RPM max that JP has set on this engine. Not even close. Boat won't do more than about 55 miles an hour. At times it would run good, and at times it would run like it was possibly getting water in it. So the next step, talk to JP, talk to some other professionals in the jet ski industry, and pull the air inlet off of the intake, start the engine, and a little bit of water got shot out of there. So I thought, oh, I did find the problem this time. The intake intercooler is leaking water into the intake, ingesting into the engine. That's why at high RPM, the engine doesn't want to run full tilt. It actually kind of falls on its face. Take the fizzle intercooler out, put the stock intercooler back in, right here. Go out. Seemed like I solved the problem. I got 8,000 RPM out of it. Why am I getting a little bit more with that? I don't know. Come back and go, okay, maybe I have a fouled spark plug. Maybe I have the coil packs failing. What else could it be? Could it be starving for fuel because the carbon filter has been bypassed now and there's some blockage causing the tank to run dry or not be able to get the air that it needs to replace the fuel? Is the fuel line possibly pinched? Something in the fuel rails, injectors, so on. Took the injectors out, had them pressure tested. They're all good. Everything I run into, good. Everything's been good. I go back to the beginning, and usually your first instinct is correct. Usually. What was my first instinct? Well, it's a fuel problem. Why are we not getting fuel? Talk to, again, some experts on the fuel systems. The fuel pumps typically work or they don't work. They don't typically have a variable pressure on them. I know you're thinking right now, you're going, well, why didn't you just pressure test it? To put the boat on a trailer and take it somewhere is quite a task. So I'm going off of what I think is the problem and chasing it down step by step by step. What was the end result? The end result is everything, and I mean everything that I checked is working correctly. However, I spoke about going back to the beginning. In the beginning, that carbon filter was spitting carbon out of the side of the boat every time you'd fill it with gas. So if it could go one way, it could go the other way. It obviously got into the fuel tank because it was all over the fuel filters, and it was on the internal filter. Well, could it have possibly gotten past both of those filters, somehow got to the pump and ate up the pump a little bit? Well, again, I'm thinking it's possible, but every once in a while, the boat would run fine. It would run like there was no problem. You would go out and hit 8,200 RPM, which is kind of what I have this thing set at with the prop that I have in it, and 82.3 or whatever for a few minutes, and then you'd go to idle and sit for a little while or putz around, and then you take off and it's right back to falling on its face again. Very confusing, and just I'm usually pretty good at figuring things out. Some of you might say, well, did you check the air filter? It doesn't have an air filter. This boat goes through a water box right here. Pure air comes in, goes through a baffle so that any water drops out the bottom of that tube over there and runs straight into the supercharger. No air filter, no air restriction. My mind kept going back to, what if it's just somehow the fuel pump, and I'm just not willing to believe that because of all of the stories. So I start looking on YouTube on RPM problems, and it seems like everything I'm finding on RPM problems on YouTube does not go to the fuel pump. It goes to something else. Spark plugs, it goes to timing, it goes to intercooler picking up water, you know, all the things that I was struggling from, injectors being plugged up and so on. Well, that fuel pump right there in the US is $600. So it's a pretty big gamble to order a fuel pump because you can't return it, I'm pretty sure, because it's an electrical product. I came to the conclusion, I'm just going to bite the bullet and buy a fuel pump and try it. Now, I could have easily taken Megan's boat next door here and taken her fuel system apart and moved it over to my fuel system and so on. I didn't want to chance that and do something to her boat, and so I ordered a new fuel pump. Put the new fuel pump in. When I first had the problem, it dropped all the way to 6,800 RPM, max RPM, 6,800 RPM. Then I cleaned the main fuel filter, 7,200 RPM. Then I cleaned the inner filter, 75 to 7,700 RPM. You see the gains keep coming from fuel. So that's why I went to the injectors, went to all the things that feed the fuel and so on. And the last thing was, it's got to be the fuel pump. That was the problem. There you have it. Hope you got something out of this. If you have an RX-PX, RX-TX 300 mini boat with a 300 in it and you're not getting full RPM, start with the filters. If you see a gain and you've replaced both filters, it's deeper than that, change out the fuel pump. $600. Hope that helped. Thanks for watching.